Nice to see everybody. There are a lot of familiar faces, and that's always heartwarming to see people. Thank you for coming out, and welcome to people who are new. And this is a particular topic that is near and dear to my heart. Just by way of introduction, Joy gave that really nice intro. I give you a little more personal side. I've been here just over 14 years. We used to be called Rehabilitation Hospital of the Cape and Islands. Anybody remember that? Yeah. RHCI. And it's been a real blessing for me to be a part of the growth of this place over the last almost 15 years. And what I do is, as Joy was saying, I provide a lot of support, education, health, and wellness to people, both who are in the hospital, maybe after a stroke or some kind of major surgery or an exacerbation of their Parkinson's. How many people have actually been upstairs and stayed in one of our rooms? There's a hand. There's a hand. Absolutely. And so, as she said, I have done a lot of different things over the past 15, 20 years, and it's been helping people with navigating all kinds of difficult medical situations. A new diagnosis of cancer, stroke, Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis. I could go on and on. Heart disease, open heart surgery. Anyone know what COPD is? Chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. So this is sort of the world that I work in helping people through these processes. And it's basically called the golden years, right? Right, no, don't hit me. I also am blessed to have 3 beautiful women in my life. 2 little ones, well, they're getting actually quite big. One is 6, one is 12, and the other one's 48. That's my wife. So, and I live in a village, a little village in Falmouth called Wacoit. And being on the Cape is also a huge blessing to me. So I wanted to talk to you all today. Some of you have heard me speak before, and there is some going over a material that I've gone and talked about, but I want to do something a little bit different today, if I possibly can. I'm going to present to you some new information, some old information. For those of you who may have a little memory problem, it's good because it's repetition. But I encourage people to ask me questions and speak out and raise your hand, and if you have an idea, a thought, a comment, a story, to bring it up. Because my purpose today is to actually engage you in a little more interaction than for me to sit here and speak to you on and on and on for the next hour or so. Okay? So if you would, feel comfortable to engage a little bit, because this is deeply personal, meaningful stuff to each and every one of the people in this room. It's deeply meaningful and purposeful and meaningful to me because, let's see if I can do this. Some of you, many of you know that one of my family members has young onset Parkinson's disease, and that's that man right there. It's kind of a fuzzy picture. He's my little brother, Mark, and that's a picture of him at the top. That's him in the left, on the right lower, giving a lecture. He wrote a book on stuttering. He's a speech therapist, and he's got a PhD in speech therapy, and he goes across the country lecturing on stuttering, and for kids and adults. He has Parkinson's. He's had it about 6 years. And that picture, it's hard to see. I know they're very fuzzy, but I'm not very technological. But that picture in the lower is the 2 of us sailing across Wacoit Bay, and you can't beat that. So Mark gives me a little extra passion for what I do because he's near and dear to my heart, and I'm a part of his Parkinson's community. And he and I actually talk and discuss a lot of the issues that we're talking about here today. So what I'm going to do today is very briefly engage you in a discussion about the nature of Parkinson's. You people know better than me what this is all about. We're not going to spend a lot of time here because there's a lot of juicy stuff that we're going to spend time with a little bit later. I'm going to review for some of you who've already heard this and introduce a new field of what's called positive psychology to you, which is very powerful in my mind, not only for Parkinson's, but for many medical conditions in terms of how to embrace a better quality of life And then finally, we're going to talk about using some of those strategies and creating your own path in living with, as best as you can, with that condition. Okay? Are you in agreement? Anybody, any questions, comments? So, Parkinson's disease. It hits across the spectrum. Up here, I don't know, that's kind of hard to see for some people, but these are people that are well known in the Parkinson's world. And who do you see up there? Anybody? Michael J. Fox? John Paul? Pope John Paul II? Mohammed, Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali, and Janet Reno. And so these are people that sort of have a name and give a face to Parkinson's, but it is pervasive across. Anybody know how many people in the U.S. approximately have Parkinson's disease?
1.5 million.
Just about. There's rough. Some people say 1 million, some people say 1.5. So that's correct. Anybody know around the world, roughly, how many people are dealing with Parkinson's disease? About 4 million people. So the issue here, both for the patient and the family, you are not alone. There are people across the globe who are dealing with this condition. It's a movement disorder, right? That's what they call it. You go to a movement disorder neurologist or specialist, and this is why. What are the things that hit people? Why? What's the movement problem? Anybody? Tremor. It's all up there, so you can cheat if you want to. Anybody? The rigidity can be that freezing that people end up, at that stiffness that people often talk about. The other motor issue, fancy medical term, is akinesia or bradykinesia. Anybody? What's that? Slowness of movement. That's the Brady. Brady is slow. Akinesia means the absence of movement. People move. Akinesia is very rare, but that's when it's very severe and people are very impaired with the Parkinson's akinesia. And then how many people struggle with the balance issue? Yes. Balance, posture. What happens to the posture? Stooped, yes. And then just in terms of ambulation, it gets more and more difficult. Any other motor things that people think of that I've forgotten? Because I do forget. Okay. So, it's a movement disorder. Guess what? It's not just a movement disorder. What do you see in Michael right here? What do you see? Laugh affect. It's often called masked face, which is very common in Parkinson's disease. It's not really a movement problem, but it's a non-motor symptom that is very common. It's the flattening of the facial expression. And what does that, how can that create problems for people?
Misinterpretation.
Misinterpretation in communication. I'm looking at, John Doe, and he's looking very serious and flat in his affect or his expression, and I could think to myself, boy, he's not very interested in what I'm talking about, or me, and he might even look a little depressed, when in fact, what? He has Parkinson's, and he may be just happy as a clam. But you can't tell because there's in essence, a freezing of the facial muscles, okay? That's just one. There are a host of other non-motor problems. What else is there that is aggravating symptoms that hit people with Parkinson's that are not the tremor, the stoop posture, and the freezing? What else do people struggle with? Anybody?
Voice.
Wow, that was like 17 answers at the same time. Blinking of the eyes.
Speech.
Speech can be expressive language difficulty. Yep, tongue. Related to that, unfortunately, some people can have difficulty managing saliva. What else?
Voice.
Voice.
Low voice.
Low voice.
Low
Medical
voice.
term for that? Anybody want to be really fancy? Hypophonia. I'm just trying to give you something to show off to your neurologist the next time you go. Lowered voice. What else?
Handwriting.
Handwriting, also called micrographia. There's what? Yeah. Oftentimes people experience you start off, it's still small, but it gets smaller and smaller and can actually sometimes just drag out to be completely ineligible. So that's the handwriting. What else? Muscle coordination. What about?
Loss of smell.
Thank you. That was a cue. Loss of smell. Very common and actually very early on for a lot of people. Yes?
Question with a lack of smell or decline, how does that impact taste?
I think, I haven't read a lot about that, but I've also heard that there's a reduction in taste buds and for some people. I don't know a lot about, but I have heard that clinically from a lot of people. What else?
Sleep problems.
Sleep problems. You guys are terrific. So here's some of the things I put up there. We're not going to spend a ton of time talking about them, but you see the list. Any of those kind of hit people hard? Any experience? We have the face, the freezing of the face we talked about, the micrographia, difficulty with sleep. That can be a whole range of different things, up and down during the night. Some people can get wild dreams, and not really on purpose, but swing at their partner in bed. Ever hear of that? That's the REM, rapid eye movement sleep disorder, that a lot of people with Parkinson's have. That's in the deep dream sleep, where most people are completely still in their sleep, but their eyes are moving. But with this condition, and some people with Parkinson's, they're acting out that dream. So if it's, just be careful, that's all I'm saying. And let your neurologist know. Loss of sense of smell. Not often talked about, but indeed, sexuality is a big issue for a lot of people in terms of how it affects the body and sexual performance and communication. All kinds of things between partners. This is a big issue. Usually doesn't come up unless I or some of the other professionals ask about it. But it is a big issue. You talked about speech, swallow. Some of the things that people didn't really think about, but temperature control. And I don't know if people have noticed that, but sometimes there's a erratic control mechanism where people are hot, overly hot, or very cold. People can have cardiac symptoms. And then the meat of what we're going to be dealing with today is the last one. It's the psychological issues. And in this culture, that's more of a taboo topic. But guess what? It's a neurological symptom of Parkinson's disease for a great many people. And I'm talking about emotional changes and cognitive changes. Cognitive changes means what?
Memory.
Thought process, organizing thoughts, speed of thoughts, memory, changes in perception. We will talk a little bit about hallucinations and delusions and that kind of stuff. So that's tough stuff. Anybody understand that? How many head nods and that kind of thing about the emotional changes and the cognitive changes? Okay, good. All right. So let's talk about that. Is it normal for people to go through a mix of emotions when they get Parkinson's?
Yes.
And why?
Loss of independence.
Why? You lose stuff. You lose your independence. You lose the road. You lose, what else? Your ability to take care of yourself. You lose coordination. The motor. Sometimes you lose the mental sharpness that you had before. So there's a lot of losses. So like anything else, there's grief involved with a new diagnosis and even ongoing through. What about denial? Anyone hear that term? It is extremely common. My brother went through this. For people to, it's not that they're saying, I don't have Parkinson's, but it's basically for a big, long period of time, you don't want to think about it. You just want to sort of put it aside in a back corner and go on with your life because it's a little bit too overwhelming sometimes. We're going to talk a little bit about the initial diagnosis in a little bit further. So I talked about the grief, the loss, and the adjustment. What about depression and anxiety? Is that something that people struggle with Parkinson's disease? Yes. How many people do you think out of the whole pool, the whole pot of Parkinson's folks, how many people struggle with this? Serious depression, anxiety?
95.
Well, I agree with you on one level. Everybody has a mix of emotions. So they get sad and they get worried and they get, but I mean deep depression, where you don't want to get out of bed, or anxiety like you panic when you're out in public because of various things, a severe, how many, that really severe, how many people do you think?
40%.
Yeah, 40 to 50% of people. Almost half of people with Parkinson's have debilitating anxiety and depression, okay? And what happens to people's symptoms when they're so anxious or they're so down? What do you think happens to Parkinson's symptoms? Absolutely. So is it an important thing to focus on and deal with? Absolutely. We talked about some of those cognitive changes, the memory. Very common with Parkinson's is an issue of what they call executive functioning. That's a neurological term, executive functioning, which means the ability to organize, plan, sequence, multitask, problem solve. Those are areas that often are affected in people with Parkinson's. They might have a fairly good memory, but they're having trouble with, doing the taxes, keeping schedules and the medications straight and that kind of stuff. And unfortunately, I said there is a segment of the Parkinson's folks, and you folks know in here, if you've ever experienced this and know about it, that it's particularly tough when people have severe cognitive changes. Very bad memory, also called PD dementia. And that can also include some unusual thought perceptions, some suspicion, paranoia, that kind of thing. Extremely difficult for the person, tremendously difficult for the family. You can see why. So, I don't want to leave out you family members. How many family members? Hands up. We have a host of people in here. We cannot talk about helping people with the quality of life with Parkinson's without talking with the family about, they are as much a part of this. They are the lifeline to people, and stress is inevitable. What kind of stressors? Those people who just put up their hands. What is stressful? Come on. Now you're being quiet. You're being quiet because I understand you may not want to bring it up to upset, people in the room. But what's stressful? Yes.
Keeping patient.
Keeping patient. Absolutely.
Communication or lack of being able to understand where the patient might be at.
Lack of communication, with the voice. Sometimes the flat affect, it's hard to read people. What do they say? 80% of communication is body language. And also, for those of you caregivers who can't hear very well, that's like a dynamic duo. Soft voice, can't hear, it's all downhill from there. No, seriously, there's a lot of stressors. What else? Anything else? John?
Memory.
Memory.
Forgetfulness.
Forgetfulness. So helping or dealing with your partner's memory difficulties, because it can be frustrating and exasperating or concerning. Yeah? I saw more hands. Yes, sir?
Trying to read the checkbook when she.
Trying to read the checkbook when she...
I do all the writing.
But you can't read her writing.
I have to put it in quicker and I keep that.
I can't read it
What the hell is
necessarily
this?
in the name.
Okay. And that's part of that handwriting thing.
Definitely.
Yeah. So there are a lot of stressors. There's other big stressors. your role changes. You're used to being a partner, going out to the movies and to dance and do stuff, but sometimes as your partner has a significant amount of difficulty, you're taking on a lot of different roles, and there's a sense of loss there. For people who unfortunately suffer severe Parkinson's symptoms, especially with the cognitive changes, the family member who is there loving and helping and supporting, there's a deep sense of losing the person you have known for so long. It's very common, and I could go with story after story after story, how while you have a caregiver or a care partner, person is helping 24/7, and they get exhausted and get ill and maybe end up in the hospital. So it's really important. This message about quality of life and taking care of oneself is not just for the patient, it's for the caregiver too. All these things we talk about apply to both. All right, before we start this, I want to do a little exercise, okay? You remember how when you were in grade school, we had to divide up into teams, and we'd go like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and then you were on team 1, team 2, team 3. You understand that, okay? So I'm going to do a little experiment, okay? Jerry, would you start you with number 1, and remember your number. So what we'll do is we'll go across the row like this. Ready? 1, 3, 1. No, wait. I'm sorry, wait a second. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2,
3, 1,
1.
2,
Remember your number. 1.
2,
3,
1,
2,
Okay, let's start back here.
1, 2,
Up, where was I? Right here.
1, 2,
You sir back there.
3.
3.
1, 2,
This is fun, right? Keep going.
1,
2,
2,
1,
1,
2, 3, 1,
3,
1,
2,
1, 2,
3, 1, 2, 1.
2,
John.
3, I'm sorry.
1,
2.
3.
1. Okay, any others back here? Anyone want to take a number? Okay. So here's I want to do a little experiment, okay? 1s. I want you to take just a moment to think about 3 things, and you got to remind me what number 1s do. But number 1s, I want you to think about 3 things in the last week that really ticked you off. Right now, all you 1s, take a moment, think about 3 things that really were hassles. They really bugged you. You got them? Think about them. Number 2s. I want you just to think right now about 3 things. Just pick 3 things. I'm not telling you whether they're hassles or not. Just think about 3 things. You can write them down, or you can just keep them in your head. I'm not going to test you, and I'm not going to ask for your answers, so don't worry. Okay, and number 3s. I want you to think about 3 blessings in your life right now. You guys are the lucky ones. Number 3s. Think about 3 blessings right now. Okay? Do we have them? Okay, hold on to them. Let them sort of saturate into your neurons, okay? And I'm going to come back to this and talk about this experiment. You guys, this is a good group for an experiment. All right, so I want to introduce you to the topic of positive psychology. And it's relatively new in my field of psychology. There's been a lot of research over the last 100 years or so, but only recently, since the late 90s, mid-90s, have there been a focus on what's called positive psychology. Anybody know what that is? I know there's people who I've taught this to do in here, but anybody who's new to me know what positive psychology is? Okay. I'm going to explain it. Here's a definition. Positive psychology is the study of what makes living? What makes life worth living? Okay? Now, it's also another definition. It's a scientific research study of positive emotions, character strengths. Those are personal character strengths, things that we sort of inherently have, and virtues that enable both individuals and communities to survive and thrive. Okay? So, where does this come from? Over the past 70 years, most of the research in my field of psychology, psychiatry, social work, mental health issues has been all about what is wrong with people. Pathology, disease, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, alcoholism. These are all important things that have needed to be worked on, addressed, and there's some fantastic advances that have happened in these areas. But I'm just telling you, the research is focused on pathology, what's wrong. And what's happened since the 90s, there was a particular gentleman I'm going to introduce you to who said, that's great, we have that foundation, but what we have done a very poor job is studying what works for people, what qualities make them rise and shine in the face of adversity, what qualities, emotions, personal strengths. And so there's research going on since the mid-90s on what characteristics and what qualities help people do the best in life. And that's what we're going to talk about. This gentleman is sort of the father of this. He's a very famous psychologist who studied depression back in the 70s, and then later he was the first one to write a lot about optimism versus pessimism. And he's the one who he became the president of the American Psychological Association in 1998, and he brought a lot of money and a lot of research to the study of this area. And he's written a book, I put it up there and it's in your bibliography there, Authentic Happiness. And what's fascinating to me is just last year, this organization that he started, there's a big foundation and positive psychology center, they have funneled an enormous amount of money to do research of positive psychology in neuroscience, meaning the study of neurological diseases, okay? This is very exciting to me. And 2 years ago when I started this, there was not a lot of connection between positive psychology and Parkinson's. That's something that, for me, I have just sort of brought the two together, okay? So this is pretty interesting. So, just so you know, positive psychology has applications across the lifespan and across many different situations in life, not just medical problems, but I can tell you that in the Army, there's a huge program in teaching soldiers the elements of positive psychology to tap into their own personal strengths. And so leaders and commanders in Afghanistan, in Iraq, have training in terms of what characteristics both they have and the men and women that they are overseeing, what qualities they can bring out in them to have the most effective team in battle. So that's just an example. You can find out, and people who've been through my program understand this, but you can find out what your strengths are. Dr. Seligman and another guy, Peterson, did a tremendous study, an international study that looked at what are the typical character strengths of humans. And they came up, after they distilled it all down, with 24 personal positive qualities that make a difference in living life and surviving life. And I'm going to list them out. But if you want to find out, and this is in your handout, what your own top strengths are, you can go online to Dr. Seligman's website and take a little test. It says it right there. To find out your own, go to the website and select. It's called the VIA Survey of Character Strengths. You can take the test. Many of you in here have already done that. So, it's a fascinating thing to do. You know, in the study of psychopathology, it's what kind of personality problems do people have? What kind of illnesses do they have? Well, this is a study of what kind of strengths do people have. So I'm going to list the 24, and you can think about for yourself which ones resonate for you, okay? These are the 24 personal strengths that they have distilled down. And some of you may be very good at some and others not. Everyone has a different quality or assortment of strengths that they bring out in their life. And I think there's a lot of it that has to do both with our genetic nature, but also how we're raised in our lives. So, take a look at some of these. I happen to have one of my top strengths is the top one up here, appreciation of beauty, Cape Cod, aesthetics, art, music. That's something that's very important to me. Those two little girls right there, that's my appreciation of beauty. Those are my daughters, okay? Other things, creativity. I can't tell you how many people that I have come across in my work over the past couple of years with Parkinson's people who have done some amazing creative works of art and music and that kind of stuff. The CD I was playing was all Parkinson's music. And for those people, those quality of that creative instinct and activity has helped them tremendously deal with their condition and their quality of life. So take a look at some of these.
Can we see the next one?
Okay, here's some other ones. People who have a quality of forgiveness, leadership. Interestingly, the research in positive psychology will boil down love, connection with people as one of the fundamental things. This is not a surprise to people, but people who are enriched with connection and interaction with other people, family and friends, have the best quality of life. That last one there, love. Love of learning. People, hands, anybody in terms of that seems to be something strong in them. They like to learn, be educated. That's a very powerful coping mechanism and quality in people. Open-mindedness and acceptance of other people's viewpoints, that sort of thing. Perseverance, that's one of my top ones. I'm a diligent person, I persevere. It carries me through lots of trying times and adversity. Any thoughts on these? Self-control. That has to do with our ability, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, but our ability to recognize that which we can control and letting go of those things that we do not really have any control. Social intelligence means the ability to kind of interact with people of all walks of life and feel very comfortable with all kinds of people. We're going to talk about spirituality and faith. Teamwork and zest is like energy. People, you've ever known people, maybe some of you in here have that quality to be exuberant, and that's a very strong personal characteristic. Those are the 24. You have them in your handout, okay? Any thoughts about that? What I am going to do is I'm going to distill 4 of those, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the research and engage you in some ideas about how 4 of these might actually help one navigate Parkinson's or navigate being a caregiver or a partner with someone with Parkinson's. I also wanted to say that the research I talked about that they've done in Parkinson's has shown that people, when they have done studies where they used strategies that enhance those strengths that we just went through, people tend to be resistant to depression and anxiety, significant reductions in anxiety and depression. Remember, that hits about 50% of the people with Parkinson's. So by focusing on some of these strategies, we may be dealing and helping with this problem. Enhance people's skills and performance in work or in community activities or things that they do. And also the research has shown, in general, that people's physical health tends to be better if they're engaging in some of those personal strengths, okay? Here's the message. We enhance those things we're good at. And if we're not so good at some other things, let them go. Get someone else to do them. So, we're going to talk about taking like 4 of these things and how you might integrate this into your own path towards a better quality of life. That's a nice path. I took that picture. That's a path leading out to the Pacific Ocean with the lighthouse at the end. I was just there. So the four things I want to talk about: stress, attitude, optimism, gratitude, and faith. Okay? So, stress. What? Nobody has it? How many people have it? Hands up. It's inevitable, right?
Yes.
There's interesting research that shows that when the researchers take advanced meditators, you know, like folks who have dedicated their life to being a monk or something like that, or a nun, and been in a monastery, and they've done physiological tests where they look at their brain scans and their EEGs and that kind of stuff. They've shown, there's also a test called the PET scan, which measures the activity of sugar in different parts of the brain. And they've showed that people who are practiced serious meditators have a significant activation of a part of the brain that has to do with happiness, open-mindedness, serenity, these kinds of positive emotions, okay? So you saw that picture of the guy who was meditating and all the wires on him. It shows that neurologically there's areas of the brain, it's called the left prefrontal cortex, is activated in people who meditate, and that's associated with serenity, peace of mind, calmness, happiness, that kind of stuff. That's this part right here, okay? That's fascinating to me. So, how many people are going to join a monastery today? Excellent. We'll let them know you're coming. You really don't have to join a monastery. You don't have to shave your head. There's also research, John Kabat-Zinn and some other researchers had looked at people who participated in an 8-week stress management program where they practiced some relaxation meditation. They did the same thing, same kind of tests. 8-week program had significant improvement, serenity, happiness, the same kind of outcomes. Showed people were much less in their depression and anxiety also. So, what's the message?
Where's the 8-week course?
Where's the 8-week course? You know, it's interesting. You can look it up online. John Kabat-Zinn does a program on mindfulness-based stress reduction. There's audio programs and that kind of stuff. In some of the work that I do individually, I work on some of this stuff with people. So there is a guy called Adam Liss who's on the Cape who does some of that here. And if you contact me at some point, I'll try and dig up his number for you. But, yes, sir. Oh, yes, ma'am.
Excuse me.
Excuse me.
I did wear John's shirt today.
Yes, Wendy.
What I am excited about is the course that's here, the one that you teach.
Yes.
And it isn't called stress management, but it incorporates all the issues around stress and it teaches us how important it is. So you don't have to go any further than here.
Right. And what Wendy's talking about is a program that I've run for the past couple of years that is actually in the process of changing. But please contact me because I am still providing the same information program and groups. It's changing a little bit because of what Joy had mentioned. You heard about Dr. Lowell and Dawn, how there's a development of something called the geriatric neurology programs. I'm a part of that, so my group programs are changing to incorporate some of that. But yes, contact me and I can fill you in on it's an 8-week sort of sessions on positive psychology and Parkinson's. So, and the message is, whatever you can do to regularly practice a way of relaxing and focusing more mindfully and trying to engage in that kind of activity can be very helpful for your health. We already talked about that stress worsens Parkinson's symptoms. It helps when you practice stress-reducing activities like meditation. It helps build your attitude and your sort of resilient mindset. The other things in terms of dealing with stress is not only just meditation, but what else can you do to reduce stress? Exercise. It's been proven significant reductions in stress if people have a regular physical outlet. Eating well, engaging in other creative activities, singing and dance. I know we have a Parkinson's dance program down Orleans, I believe it is. So there's all kinds of things. There's some interesting new stuff happening with the research on optimism and attitude. Do people think this makes a difference in terms of how you deal with this condition, or family members dealing with this condition? Why? Why does your attitude or your perspective make a difference?
Because it's reflected in the patient.
It spreads.
It spreads. It's kind of infectious. Either way, if you're upbeat, have an open, positive perspective, that can be infectious. The reverse is true too. If people tend to get very pessimistic or anxious, that can be, it can drag people down, not only emotionally, but physically too. But let's talk about it a little bit more. How do you build your own level of optimism? Well, I wanted to share with you some research by a Spanish researcher in 2002 who looked at what's happening in the brain when they take a placebo. So he had a group of people, and some people got a Parkinson's medicine like Cinnamon, and some people got a sugar pill, okay? And they measured how much increase in dopamine, which is the neurotransmitter most significantly related to Parkinson's. They measured how much dopamine levels were in the brain. Guess what? The people who took the placebo had a significant increase in dopamine in their brain. Why? Because they had the belief and the expectation that this was going to help them. So it was sort of a mindset that said, I'm taking this. They didn't know which one it was, so they had a belief that this was going to help them. Therefore, so what it's telling you, there's a neurological connection between your beliefs and what happens in your brain with the amount of dopamine, which is significantly impacting how you move and walk and everything else. So what that's saying is belief has a big place in how you function, okay? Another one, this is new, Dr. Lisa Schulman at the University of Maryland has done some very interesting studies that look at, she calls it self-efficacy. That's a fancy word that means how you see your own ability to control things in your life. So you may believe that you have a lot of internal control over your situation, and you also can recognize where you don't have control. People who think that everything outside of them is controlling them, they have low self-efficacy or low self-control. And what she found was that Parkinson's patients who had a strong sense of internal, they call it locus of control, a strong sense of their own personal control, tended to have much less physical disability. They saw themselves as being less disabled, and they had a better quality of life. This is the first research that I've found with Parkinson's and this area of, self-control and attitude. So to me, that says a lot. If you have a belief that you can do certain things to manage your life in your Parkinson's, or your partner is Parkinson's, and you have a strong belief that there's things you can do, and also have an understanding that there are things that you can't do, a good sense of that understanding, people have much better health outcomes, okay? The other thing, this study was fascinating to me. I think 7 different countries across the globe did an international study where they were trying to correlate what factors related with quality of life in Parkinson's disease, okay? And the more than the medicine, the Cinemet, the Requip, more than the medicine, they found that the things that correlated with high quality of life were optimism. So they surveyed patients, family members, doctors, and professionals, and they rated which things were most important in terms of quality of life with Parkinson's. A level of high optimism was right up there at the top. What contributed the most to decreased quality of life? Depression. Okay? And these factors were as powerful or more powerful than the medicine in many cases. So to me, that was also good evidence that if we can change the way we look at things and the way we perceive and our level of control of our situation, we can dramatically improve quality of life. Now, people, the pessimists say, well, I can't change my thoughts. I can't change. This is the way it's always going to be. But there's a lot of evidence in psychology. There's a lot of approaches that are positive psychology, cognitive behavioral approaches, where people can actually begin to rehearse and practice new ways of looking and challenging and sort of interrupting old negative patterns. We all have some negative patterns, but we need to first be aware of them and then think about ways we can change them. People, there's fascinating studies that say that you actually can become more of an optimist, you know. But if you believe you can't, you won't. So you have to believe that you can and then learn how to change those thought processes. It's creating new mental scripts, new plays, new ways of thinking of things. Gratitude. Many of you have heard this from me before, but there's some interesting research that's going on this. This is usually something that comes out of spiritual religious faith. But in our culture, it's not given a lot of play. We live in a secular society. You know, churches are getting a lot reduction in church members. There's a lot of concern. Our society is very individualistic. It's very sort of self-made man. It's very much sort of autonomous. And what I think is important to realize is that when people show an appreciation for those around us and those who have come before us, there is a tremendous value in quality of life when people focus on the blessings in their lives, okay? So there was a gentleman at the University of California in Davis who did research on 3 groups. Number 1, 2, and 3. Okay, who were my number 1s? Okay, what did I ask you to do? Oh, think of 3 hassles, 3 irritating things. And the number 2s? Just think about 3 things. And you lucky number 3s, what did you think about?
3 blessings.
3 blessings, things that you appreciated. Well, there's been research at the University of California, Davis, that has shown that people who practice once a night for 3 weeks, doing these 3 activities had certain effect on their quality of life. Okay, so what do you think happened? Let's start with the hassle-y people. What do you think happened when they focused on 3 hassles every night for 3 weeks? They felt terrible. They had more anxiety, depression. They had a reduction in their performance, and they were less likely to perform their exercises. I bet their blood pressure went up too. The number 2s, the neutrals remained neutral. There wasn't a lot of change. But guess what? You number 3s, there was a significant increase just by writing 3 things every night in a little log, journal. Over a 3-week period, improvement in mood, significant improvement in mood, significant improvement in performance, and they got out there and did their exercises. And guess what? This is not what this talk is about. but exercise is king with Parkinson's. You all know that. The research shows that. But it's also one of the most difficult things for people to do. So by practicing, focusing on the 3 things that you're grateful for, it has a significant impact on many levels, okay? He did this with college students, not Parkinson's patients. But then he did it with people with neuromuscular disorders, polio. Same improvement, okay? It hasn't been done with Parkinson's, folks. Maybe we'll do it. I was trying to get a sense. So you number 3s, I'm sure you're just going to zip home and start doing your exercise program. And for number 1s and number 2s, start practicing what number 3 are doing, okay? If you're interested in this topic, the book that Dr. Emmons has written is called Thanks, How the New Science of Gratitude Can Make You Happier. It's in your handout. So the bottom line is, what? Count your blessings, not you. Okay? Faith and how this impacts. I think this is central to quality of life across the board, whether we're talking about Parkinson's or anything else. But there's some, we know this from a religious and spiritual level, but there's been some interesting science that has happened in terms of looking at this. Generally speaking, across the general population, people who focus on their spirituality, their religious faith, tend to have better health. There's a study at Yale University where they looked at people with just pure attendance at their church or synagogue or temple. They had, the people who were more regular had better health. That was a general population. I found one study, not a lot on this, but with Parkinson's, in 2006, where they looked at people who practiced their faith, had a sense of purpose, positive belief, that gets into the attitude, and practiced a prayer on a regular basis, had better ability to cope with the challenges of Parkinson's disease. So I think it's sort of common sense. It's intuitive, but it's a reminder that sometimes we all can put more energy into this area in our lives, and that it's very easy as in human nature, especially in this modern society, to stray away from it. So it's a reminder that this offers a lot in terms of quality of life and coping and that kind of stuff. It's what carries people through the hardest of times. What is it? I've talked to this a lot. There's no atheist in a foxhole. So how can you practice in your own way? It doesn't have to be a particular religion. You can have your own deep sense of spirituality. Here are some ideas. Some people find their spirit, like me, out on the ocean, out in nature. It's just the general idea that you find your own meaning and purpose in the face of challenges, and you connect to something bigger. And I think, you know, what's important to remember is when you tap into a deeper sense of purpose and meaning and spirit, what you're recognizing is that you and your loved one are not defined by the Parkinson's or by the physical challenge. There is something much more greater, bigger, a part of you, and that's just something that you have to deal with, but it does not define you. Thoughts and comments about this topic? So find your own path. In summary, I'd just like to say that while very often the emotional, the psychological, the cognitive changes in Parkinson's are not often addressed in the general neurology office, and that comes both from the medical profession but also our own reservations about doing so. They have huge and significant impact on people's function with Parkinson's and quality of life. And so find your own strengths and find ways to master your stress, to build optimism, a new way of looking at things, your own sense of self-control, what you can and can't. And finally, finding your own blessings and practicing your own special way of connecting to something bigger and greater. That, to me, is a comprehensive way of dealing with Parkinson's, and that includes what you can do, and then reaching out to those professionals that can help you in terms of your Parkinson's neurologist and exercise programs and any other programs that help support people through the process. Thank you.
Thank you.